All right. Well, welcome to the 2021-22 Charter Revision Commission informational webcast here. I'm John Boquette, editor of the Newtown Bee, and I am pleased to be here with Charter Revision Commissioner Andy Buzzi and Legislative Council Chairman Jeff Capeci. The Newtown Charter is the community's constitutional document, and over the past quarter century, it's been subject to numerous revisions. One that occurred in 2000 was structured in a way that when voters weighed multiple questions, they authorized the creation of a board of finance, but rejected another that would have given it given that finance board policymaking responsibilities. As a result, the Newtown Board of Finance has acted in an advisory capacity with almost no legislative or policy authority since. This year, following dozens of meetings, hearings, amendments, and discussions, one of the two charter questions Newtown voters will be asked to accept or reject involves eliminating the Board of Finance. The second question takes up the remaining 13 revisions recommended by the latest Charter Commission, and both have been approved and endorsed by the Legislative Council to go to the voters. So we're going to briefly review the raft of proposals tied into the second question, and then we're going to spend the rest of our time tonight discussing the much more impactful Finance Board question. But first, gentlemen, concerns have been aired, including one by the Newtown Bee at the beginning of the charter review process regarding the chairman's decision to permit charter commissioners to work in two-person work groups that were not subject to open meeting laws codified in the Connecticut Freedom of Information Law. Can you briefly explain, Andy, how you determined these could be private, closed meetings, and why this was permitted in the formative stage of the review?
Yeah, I can tell you that when we started on the Charter Revision Commission, this same question was brought to my attention immediately when we formed the commission, and I decided to lay out where we had work groups. Charter Revision Commission had a lot of work to do, and there was an awful lot of research to back up our discussions. So in order to have certain commissioners be tasked with certain things and be able to support the commission when we have our meetings and do our actual work, I contacted Tom Hennick, who runs the FOI in Connecticut. And we talked about what are the permitted structures for the committee. And what we did is we looked at the latest law that was ruled upon. There was a case that was ruled upon, the Meriden versus the Freedom of Information Act Commission, which is the definitive law in Connecticut today with regard to the operation of commissions and our ability to set out small work groups that can go out and do some background work to bring to the commission. None of the work groups that were part of the Charter Revision Commission, we had three of them. We had a work group of two people that was tasked with Board of Finance questions. We had a work group of two people that were tasked to research Board of Education questions. And we had a work group of two other people who were tasked with looking at the many and various smaller items that we attended to. And none of those work groups had a quorum. And none of those work groups had any express authority. But what those work groups did do is they did gather some information and put some research together and bring that to the commission, where all of our work was done in public. All the work of the commission was done in public. All the information was made available in public in part of our minutes in our meeting. And everything the commission did, whether it was the information that we reviewed and considered, whether it was the debate that we had on all of the issues and the language that we actually used, reviewed, modified, and eventually approved as far as our recommendations were concerned that were contained in our draft report. Was
okay, but to reiterate, this was discussed with and endorsed by the Connecticut Freedom of Information Commission's a public liaison.
Yeah, it actually the head person there, Tom Hennig,
Right.
had actually a number of conversations with him because we wanted to make sure we were doing it right.
Okay, great, thank you. Secondly, for Jeff, it's been suggested that the decision to eliminate the Board of Finance is something of a political maneuver or a so-called power grab on the part of a legislative council with a Republican majority. How do you react to that?
Well, thank you, John, for holding this forum. I hope a lot of people watch it and get some information before they go to vote. And I'm most hopeful that the voters won't find out about the charter changes when they look at the ballot on election day. And so I really appreciate the Bees giving us the opportunity to get this information out. But as far as a Republican power grab, this Board of Finance, this Charter Revision Commission was seated by the prior Legislative Council, which was definitely the first Charter Revision Commission that spanned multiple legislative councils that I can remember. And I don't know if we've ever had one prior to that. So it was unique like that. So the charge was created by the prior Legislative Council, and the Charter Revision Commission was commissioned, and they started their work, and they completed their report and delivered it to the current Legislative Council, of which I am chairman now. So it really wasn't a power grab. It was something that was added to the charge by the prior council, and it was the recommendation that came back from this Charter Revision Commission was accepted by this current council.
So once again, a little bit of an anomaly in terms of
yes,
the history of charter revisions and their commissions in Newtown, where it was the first in at least a quarter century that was proposed and charged and seated by a democratically controlled legislative council, but then came to a Republican dominated legislative council for the final stage leading up to commissioning the questions to the voters.
And there was nothing that we threw out that wasn't requested by the prior Charter Revision Commission that was recommended to us from the previous Legislative Council, and came as a recommendation to us from the Charter Revision Commission.
Right, so the transition was collaborative, irrelevant to the leadership or the majority of the political makeup.
I agree, yep.
Good. Okay, Andy, addition?
Yeah, I was just gonna add that my commission was made up of 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and an independent. It was a bipartisan commission. Almost all the work that we did and all the things that we approved, much of it was unanimous. And everybody worked together. I was very proud of the way they went through. Not that we didn't have debates and differences of opinions over issues, because we did. And anybody who listened to any of our commission meetings could see that 5 lawyers and 2 civilians, God bless them, basically suffered through an awful lot of very intense debate.
And the final outcome, final vote on the recommendation was what?
Final vote on on our different recommendations were different, but almost all of them were unanimous. But the final, and we'll talk about the Board of Finance later. We'll talk about the final.
Very good. And Jeff, the final vote to recommend the charter revisions that appear on the ballot?
They were all unanimous.
Okay, very good.
To accept the Charter Revision Commission, that was unanimous.
Okay, and the questions.
The questions were divided, but not on this. But the question 1, I believe, was unanimous. Certain members of the council wanted to separate out some of the questions in the second question and have more than 2 questions. But the majority vote was the questions that appear on the ballot, that will appear on the ballot.
in a single question, which we will get to right now. Thanks for being brief, gentlemen, and we'll try to keep it that way. So folks who are watching, the second question on the charter revision, the second ballot question for the charter revision states, shall the remaining charter amendments adopted by the Legislative Council on July 20th, 2022 be approved? Approval of question number 2 accepts the rest of the proposed changes in their entirety, comprised of organizational, non-substantive, and substantive changes made to the document, including, but not limited to, the following 13 points. Now, this question involves all additional revisions except the question of whether or not to eliminate the Board of Finance. So let's start with them. The first is a provision redefining the term town departments as it applies to the Board of Education by exempting the Board of Education from certain duties and functions of town bodies, which would violate other provisions of the Connecticut general statutes applicable to the Board of Education. Andy, is there a quick and easy way to tell people what that means?
Yeah, it's a clarification. All we did in the charter is we just clarified that the Board of Education, there are specific statutes that deal with powers of the Board of Education, okay? This charter does not override those statutes because those statutes would prevail. So that's what we put in the charter. We just said your town department for all intents and purposes, but in any time that the statutes say that you have a slightly different power, of course, the statutes control. And that's all that says.
Jeff, anything to add?
No. It's clear.
Okay, very good. The second piece of question 2, the Connecticut general statutes shall prevail over the provisions of section 2-01C, which allows town bodies to make their own rules of conduct. That's pretty self-explanatory. No, any input from either of you?
Just that we have a charter and that charter governs our town, but the statutes always control because we only get our power from the state itself.
Statutes trump the charter.
Nothing we can do in locally can override statute unless there's a enabling provision in that statute, which wouldn't be overriding by that definition.
Element C, section 2-05D eliminates the Building Appeals Board from the charter, as does section 2-15D. That is eliminating a board that has not been seated or active in my memory.
Correct.
Or anybody's memory, and we had quite a few people come and talk to us about it from very far back. But what was clear is that there is a statutory provision that allows people who, if they did have an appeal that would fall under the Building Appeals Board jurisdiction, where they could go direct to the state to get relief from that. So it was redundant, and we didn't really need it.
The fourth of the 13 elements excuses members of a town body from voting on the minutes of a previous meeting at which they were not in attendance. Common sense. I don't think that bears any input. Element E describes the procedure for filling vacancies on the Board of Education. Input on that, gentlemen?
I think that was just to make it consistent with, or use the same procedure that the Legislative Council follows. The Board of Ed would follow the same.
And that's exactly what we tried to do. We looked at them as equal bodies, so they should have equal rules.
Okay, the next item states the town clerk shall also be the registrar of vital statistics. It just codifies that secondary title in the document, right?
The statutes prescribe that, so that's all it does.
Okay. The next element states the Board of Police Commissioners shall also act as the Civilian Police Review Board.
So that's something that we did. That was not mandatory, but it was part of the statute, part of the acts that were passed in the Accountability Act, and we decided that we already have a fantastic police commission here and that they could take on that responsibility.
So statute now requires the municipalities to establish a Civilian Police Review Board. You codified that in the charter.
We did. It doesn't actually require it, but yes, we did.
I get it. Yep. The next element eliminates the Building Appeals Board, which we already discussed. The next item describes the election process for the Board of Education. Anything on that? Is that the election process if there's a vacancy, or what are the...
I think that's filling an open seat.
I think, yeah, we talked about making, well, the part where you're talking about there, we did two things. One, we made the Board of Ed, filling a vacancy in the Board of Ed, the same as filling a vacancy in the Legislative Council.
Okay.
Like I said, we looked at the two bodies and thought they were equal. They should have the same rules. And the second thing that we did is we increased the time in which boards can fill their own vacancies. It used to be 30 days, but today, with being able to publish and getting people together and everything like that, we expanded it to 45 days for all the boards and commissions because it's just more practical. It gives them the ability to replace their own members.
So that will be one thing that is approved if question 2 is approved.
Yes, that's correct.
Very good. Okay.
Because in all of our boards and commissions, if the board doesn't act in time, then it defaults to the selectmen.
Okay. And once again, if you're viewing this and you joined us late, we're talking about question 2 of the charter revisions that are going to appear on the ballot this November. All of the provisions we're talking about right now are all under the singular question 2. So if you vote for question 2 and you vote to approve it, it will approve all of the things that we're talking about right now. The next element delineates the duties of the Legislative Council relative to the budget. Is that as complex as it sounds, Jeff?
I think what that's referring to is replace with the Board of Finance going away. It changes the role slightly of the Legislative Council during charter change. I believe that was the only change there.
Okay.
Just by taking the Board of Finance out, we made a lot of changes in the charter because the Board of Finance had certain duties and the Legislative Council had certain duties. A lot of them were redundant, but we had to take it out. So we made a lot of those changes.
Okay, so that begs the question, if item 1, eliminating the Board of Finance, is not approved, but item 2 is approved with the provision of clarifying the Legislative Council's process relative to the budget, then there is no consequence of that because the Board of Finance is still empowered.
Yeah, I don't think you could take that language out.
Okay, very good. The next item defines the process subsequent to a failed annual budget referendum. What's that about?
I think that was the second one, but all it was trying to clarify or codify is current practice, that we go back to referendum.
Okay, very good. The second to last provision in question 2 revises the requests for emergency appropriations. We've only seen emergency appropriations a handful of times in the past quarter century, typically in reaction to a catastrophic event, right?
Right.
Yeah. What we did, and I think emergency and special appropriations we did together, and we looked at them, and the big change in all of that is that we changed the charter to allow the Board of Education to make a special appropriation to initiate the process itself. Before, the Board of Education couldn't initiate the process, but now it could initiate the process.
So it could expedite the delivery of funds to address an emergency.
Well, actually, we made the change under special appropriation. Under emergency appropriations, we initially recommended that the Board of Ed would have the same power, but after our discussions with the attorney that was hired by the Legislative Council and looking at the actual emergency powers that the first selectman has, we agreed to leave those emergency powers with the first selectman. But the Board of Education, who really does need the ability to initiate a special appropriation, bring it before the council for something that's important, something that they want to do, something that the town you have the ability to talk about, be able to bring it directly to the council without having to go through a gatekeeper. And so we expanded their powers in that way.
Okay, so these last two final provisions under question 2 revise the requests for emergency appropriation and then modifies the procedure for emergency and special appropriations. So that concludes our discussion of the second referendum question. All of those provisions that we've previously discussed are under them. As we learned a little bit earlier, the council in its deliberation decided that it did not want to also lump in the question about the elimination of the Board of Finance. So it created a single separate question that reads, shall the charter be amended to provide the sections 2-125, sections A and B, Board of Finance be deleted from the charter and all powers thereof to be vested with the Legislative Council. The explanatory text additionally states that approval of question 1 will eliminate the Board of Finance from the charter as an advisory body. All powers of the Board of Finance would thereafter be vested in the Legislative Council. Any reference to the Board of Finance will also be eliminated from the charter. So let's get started, Andy, with you. Let me know and let the folks that are watching know a little bit about how the two-person working group brought their research to the full Charter Revision Commission, and briefly the machinations that led up to the point where the Charter Revision Commission recommended this to the council.
Sure. So let me start with a little history, and let me start by saying the Board of Finance, we've had a number of members on the Board of Finance over the years who have done a fine job and have certainly contributed to the process and have contributed to the functioning of the town of Newtown. And our analysis of the Board of Finance in no way reflects anything that current or prior Board of Finance members have done. What this has to do with is it has to do with efficiency. It has to do with accountability. It has to do with how our towns are supposed to be able to run. And in the state of Connecticut, all municipalities get their power from the statutes. And the statutes provide that we are to have an executive and we are to have a single fiscal authority, okay? And in Newtown, we have something a little bit different. And we have something a little bit different because a number of years ago, we had a Charter Revision Commission and a Legislative Council that couldn't agree. And then through the way when the Charter Revision Commission petitioned to put their question on the ballot,
yeah,
the voters ended up voting in such a way where they ended up with both a Legislative Council and a Board of Finance. In most towns in Connecticut, most towns, you'll find that they will either have a Legislative Council or they'll have a Board of Finance, or they'll have, some other body that is a single fiscal authority. And
okay.
So we were looking at that question. So what we did is we started by researching what other towns do, what's in their charters. There are some great facilities where we can get information, and,
yep,
and our two-person work groups did that. But more importantly, we asked everybody who wanted to come to the commission to come talk to us. The current heads of the Board of Finance, the Legislative Council, past first selectmen, the current first selectmen. We had a number of people, members on them, come and write to us or speak to us directly and say, what do you think about the Board of Finance? And what is it what would you want to do with the Board of Finance? And what I found most interesting is that at the time we were having the meetings, the current chair of the Board of Finance and the vice chair came to us, and they basically said, hey, as a Board of Finance, we'd love to do policy. We'd love to do policy, but we don't want to do the budget. We don't want to do the transfers. We don't want to do all the technical stuff that goes in there. That's what we'd like to do. And of course, we had people who said, no, we want the Board of Finance. We had people who said, no, we don't need the Board of Finance. And that is the trough of information that we had to sift through. And we did that. We did that for months. and we had different opinions. And
I remember reporting on those meetings, and folks can go to newtownb.com and read our reports, which primarily involved a lot of interviews and lookbacks from you and several other members. The chronology of the development under the umbrella of the Charter Revision Commission is all there. In the final stages leading up to the recommendation to the council, how did the last chapter kind of play out?
Well, we talked about whether or not we would have a Board of Finance, whether the Board of Finance should be appointed or whether it should be elected. These are all questions that we struggled over, and we did different iterations of what a Board of Finance would look like or what the town would look like without a Board of Finance. And we discussed them all. And in the end, I got a letter from Paul Lundquist, who was the chairman of the council at the time, who said, hey, the council can also appoint a commission on their own through ordinance. And that was a great idea, because we discussed that. We discussed that a lot. And we said, you know what? Instead of us telling the council what support they were going to have, why don't we remedy the issue of having two fiscal authorities in town, which we didn't think was quite correct, by having one fiscal authority and let them appoint a commission to do the policy work that the current Board of Finance says that's what they want to do anyway.
So if this charter revision is approved and the Board of Finance is eliminated in the charter, there is still an opportunity, in fact, to possibly even empower some of the same individuals who hoped to continue on as policymaking officials in a Board of Finance configuration to come back as appointed members of this committee.
Absolutely. Right. And when we presented this to the Legislative Council, sorry, Jeff, I just wanted to say, when we presented it to the Legislative Council, it was a directive from the commission members itself. We're eliminating the Board of Finance here. We are laying out the possibility that the Legislative Council, by ordinance, can create a commission or a committee that will be able to support them in the policy area that they think they need most. And lastly, don't call it the Board of Finance, because the Board of Finance is a legislative term of art. It's a statutory term of art. Yes. Call it something else, so it doesn't look like we have two fiscal authorities.
Okay.
So that was our recommendation.
And the recommendation on this particular item was majority.
6-1.
And the one Republican.
And the one person who voted against it, the reason he voted against it is because he wanted an appointed policy board that was advisory, which is actually what it is that we hope that the Legislative Council accomplishes when they pass their ordinance and do that.
And that no vote was on the part of a Republican.
And it was.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, just to follow up, great history, Andy, but the Legislative Council recently charged the Ordinance Committee to take up this very topic. The Ordinance Committee met once on it, and they've started the work and will continue to work on it over the next couple of months to put together an ordinance that will obviously go to public hearing when complete, and will form this new body, whatever its name will be. The Ordinance Committee will do all of the detail work and bring a recommendation to the council probably early next year. I don't know if with budget timing, if it's going to happen before or after, but it'll happen soon enough. And certainly that work is started now, and it will be ongoing for the next several months.
So if this provision fails and the Board of Finance continues on in the charter and in reality as it exists today, will they have the wherewithal to be able to request or, in fact, reject doing anything except policy work if they don't want to? Or will they have to weigh in on all of the, will they continue to have to be a piece of the trinity of approval of all of the measures that they've entertained in the past?
I think the way it would go is if the charter, if the Board of Finance stays, all of the language relevant to the Board of Finance with regard to the CIP, with regard to the budget, all that will stay. Its role will stay as it is today.
And we continue to need to be responsible for all the appropriations, all of the approvals, all of the departmental issues.
All that work would have to continue to be done because the Board of Finance can't change itself. Okay. This can anything that we want to change in our town governance has to be done through the charter. It can't change itself. So if it's a yes, then we go on with what we've proposed is a more efficient government, which gives a better opportunity, and this is very important to me, for people to be heard as projects and as issues that are important to the town go through the Board of Education and to the Legislative Council and the Board of Selectmen. It gives much more opportunity, a better opportunity for people to participate in that process. And that's what's important to me. I want meaningful participation. And by having a single fiscal authority, we have single accountability. If you're upset at somebody, you're upset at the council because they're the ones that are making the decision.
Okay. And Jeff,
to petition for a specific budget line item for or against it, rather than having to make your case at 3 different bodies, you reduce it to 2.
Either the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Education, and then straight to the council.
Council.
With the proposed committee doing the heavy lifting and then making a recommendation, which will then be deliberated.
The proposed committee would be just for policy stuff. It wouldn't be part of the budget process, the annual budget process. Yeah.
Okay.
Efficiency and accountability. This Correct. Charter makes it much easier for the voters, for the citizens of Newtown, to be able to hold a specific body accountable for the things that they are charged, instead of having it spread out over, the Board of Finance, the Board of Education, the Board of Finance, and the Legislative Council.
Okay, we are at about at the 30-minute mark here, just a little over. Are there any other things that either of you want to say about question 1 in regards to further informing or educating the voters on ramifications involved in the elimination of the Board of Finance?
I think
I have nothing. If people have questions, they can certainly email me or any council member. We're happy to discuss these changes. And if anyone has questions as to why they would want to eliminate this Board of Finance, all of the things that we've stated now. But if anyone has further questions, feel free to reach out to me or Andy or any of your council representation.
And Jeff, in the coming weeks leading up to Election Day, will the council be doing anything to position itself to act quickly on the pivot, if you will, if this question is approved and suddenly all of the financial duties are now placed in the hands of the council, or are you going to wait for the vote to occur before you begin the machinations of the process?
The vote is only a few weeks out, so I don't think we'll get a lot done. But certainly, like I said, the ordinance committee has been charged. The ordinance committee met once. Maybe the committee will meet one more time before the election, but I assume the most of the work will be done afterwards. Certainly, if it does pass, it's not like we're going to need a Board of Finance for the budget season come early next year, which would be a good thing.
Very good. Andy,
So,
any
John?
last words?
Yeah, please. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for hosting this, giving us the opportunity to explain what the work that we did. And I really appreciate the B doing this. I think it's important for people to know. I want to thank all of my commissioners. They were dedicated and they were committed. And we had a wonderful bipartisan experience where we were all concerned, and we are concerned with having a better and more efficient government for Newtown so that people can be involved in it and their voices can be heard. And so we would appreciate your consideration in helping us make our charter more efficient and make our government more accessible and accountable, which is, I think, what we're trying to do here.
Good. Well, on behalf of the local newspaper, your Newtown Bee, I hope voters will, as Jeff pointed out earlier, realize that candidates are not the only thing on the ballot. There's also going to be a statewide constitutional question on early voting, along with the 2 charter revision questions here in Newtown. And I hope this webcast has helped to explain to voters outside of the legalese of the questions and the restrictions and the explanatory text about what you will be voting on, as our guests, the Charter Revision Commissioner Andy Buzzi and the Legislative Council Chairman Jeff Capeci have invited. Please do reach out and contact either or both of them or any member of the council between now and Election Day if you have specific questions on any of the 13 provisions under question 2, or any concerns or questions regarding the elimination of the Board of Finance if approved. But ultimately, our wish is that every qualified voter in Newtown turns out on Election Day and casts their ballots, including consideration of the charter revision questions and the state constitutional question. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time this evening. And
Thank you, John.
We'll see you at the polls.
Thank you. Thank you, John.